Hey everybody, it's Corey with Blue Falcon Board Gaming. If you're new to the channel, I'm a United States Marine that started Blue Falcon Board Gaming in the Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia tri-state area with the hopes of using board games as a way to promote positive mental health, as well as to make board games more accessible to the community by hosting and co-hosting free events. Today, I have the designer of Air, Land, and Sea with me, John Perry.
Hello, good to be here.
So, John, would you like to introduce yourself? Who's John outside of board games?
Sure. So for many years, my day job was as a private tutor. I had my own company. Um, but now I'm full time in games, although it's not just board games, it's also video games that I do. So that helps make that possible. I live in the Philadelphia area, and although most of my life I lived in Los Angeles, so that still kind of feels more like home to me. But this is becoming home now, slowly but surely. Those are some basic facts about me.
Okay. So what got you into board games? Is it something that you were, introduced to as a child, or did you discover it later on in life or anything like that?
So there's two answers. I mean, one answer is that I've always been into board games, right? I mean, as far back as I can remember, I was playing board and card games. I even owned some hobby games. I owned Cosmic Encounter and Hero Quest back in the day. But there's sort of a second answer too, because I never was able to play those games that often, weirdly enough. I didn't really come from a game playing family, so I had them and I would set them up and read the rules and spend a lot of time thinking about them, which maybe seems kind of strange now looking back on it. But I didn't have a lot of opportunity to play, and it was more, I think, later, when I was past college and fully an adult and had some disposable income and discovered BGG and all of that I was able to, host game nights and, actually maybe, go to conventions and actually play more of these games. So it does feel like there was a moment in my life when I realized this, even though I've always been into it.
Yeah, I think that's from everybody that I've talked with. That seems like that's pretty normal. Everybody's got the kids or the games laying around as kids and stuff, and they may or may not be really attentive with it. And then usually around that college time frame, somebody's like, "Oh, what's Catan?"
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, I had played Catan, and I think the game that really accelerated my interest in just modern games and actually going on to BGG and looking up new stuff was Dominion for me.
Okay. Yeah, I got into it because I was playing Magic or learning how to play Magic. I used to work at a drop-in homeless shelter, and some of the guys that were there, I had to find a way in with them because they were really kind of just reclusive, off to the side, didn't want to really talk about programs, but they would always play Magic. So I had them teach me Magic and got in with them to build that rapport. But then that got me onto the Dice Tower, then Tolarian Community College, and then suggested videos from the Dice Tower started popping up. So board games started really popping up in my peripherals and stuff. And
yeah, finding reviewers and stuff was really key for me too, just to realize that there was this larger, infrastructure for learning about this stuff.
Yeah, Scythe was the first modern board game that I started out with, and now I'm at 372 games.
Nice.
It's
quite a collection, yeah.
So how did you make the transition from playing board games to designing board games? Was there a specific moment that you can recall that you had that spark of inspiration, or you made that decision to actively try to make a game?
So again, that's also kind of it's a similar set of answers, right? Because I was always designing games as a kid. As I was in seventh grade, if I had an open-ended project about a book that didn't have to be a written report, I would make a board game for it. So I was always making games, but I wasn't necessarily making them seriously, right? I wasn't trying to get them published. So that certainly came later in life. And actually that was because there was a game that I had made when I was a lot younger. I think the first version of this game was on no cards, and I made it in 1999. And it sat in a little tin. And my good friend had it and just sort of uncovered it one day and brought it to me and said, we should finish this game. This game is, I've always, he had remembered it and I had sort of forgotten about it at that point, but I looked at it again. I was like, this is a cool game. And that was around the time I was also, going on BGG and watching reviews and playing newer games like Dominion. I was like, this would be a fun project to sort of take this old game that I made ages and ages ago as a child, and let's polish it up, and let's put it on Game Crafter, which is a website where you can, make and sell games without having to be a publisher. And that game became Time Barons, which is my first published game. And that would have been, I think I started self-publishing that maybe 2012, 2013. And then we found a real publisher, WizKids, for it around 2014.
Okay.
And ever since then, I've been trying to just keep putting out games, getting them published. So that's really the genesis of me doing this, seriously, even though I've done it my whole life in some senses.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty cool that you've got it, as an adult, you're getting a game that you started as a child or as a younger teen, and then polishing it up, and it's still holding up.
Yeah, and of course, parts of it had to change, of course, right?
Yeah.
but yeah, some of those ideas still kind of worked, which is interesting.
Nice. Yeah, so I'd reached out to you because I'm doing the Meeples at Sea cruise in March, and I'm going to be demoing Air, Land, and Sea through Envoy on the cruise there. So I just wanted to kind of get a hold of you and see if we can get some backstory on Air, Land, and Sea that I could share with anybody that may come up to demo. So what was the inspiration for it? What was that process for it?
Yeah, there were a few different inspirations. One was poker, right? Always been a huge fan of poker, and this idea of poker that everything's quite random in terms of what you're dealt, but you never, you have this option to fold, right? And so knowing when to fold is such a key part of that game, and you didn't see that in very many hobby games. So I was had this idea that I wanted to put that in a hobby game. And then there was another game that I played that I still really enjoy called Red 7, a little card game. And that has something close to that poker dynamic in it, but I didn't feel like it was fully realized, but it sort of showed me, here's a way this maybe could go. And then the other thing that was inspiring me at the time was I was playing a lot of games with who's now my wife, and I always wanted a game that I could throw in my pocket, take with me to a bar, take with me to a restaurant, and just be able to play quickly and in any scenario, but that wasn't going to get tiresome, right? If you played it a lot of times, it's going to have enough strategy and depth there. And so I was always trying to come up with that game too that would fill that space in my life. And so all those combination of influences went into what became Air, Land, and Sea. And so I knew that I wanted a head-to-head game that was just cards, where you had this strategic game that you're playing, right? I'm trying to outplay you with my hand, but at the same time, I can if I realize that I'm going to lose, if I can see the writing on the wall and I can fold early, just like in poker, I can save myself some trouble, right? I can give my opponent less points. And so that's the foundation of the game. Now, I guess there's one more big inspiration, which is I needed a way to make that game work, right? I mean, so what are you doing with these cards, right? How are you and your opponent battling? And that idea came from another game called Battle Line, which the basic idea of that game and of Air, Land, and Sea is that you have these different areas on the table, and you need to be controlling a majority of them. So in Air, Land, and Sea, you have your air, your land, your sea, hence the name, and you just need to be controlling 2 out of 3, assuming that you don't fold, of course. So that's sort of very quick overview of what my influences were. And then the final game, that's what it is. It's a 2-player head-to-head small card game, plays quickly, with this strategy of controlling areas, but also this extra layer of being like poker and trying to know when to fold.
Yeah, that withdrawal mechanic, that can be a game changer, because if you know that you're going to have a really bad hand, because you only start with 6 cards.
Right.
So if you know that you're going to have a bad hand and you're not going to be able to control 2, you want to pull out. If not, you're just giving your opponent 6 points and they only need 12 to win. So it's having that thought process. But I really like it whenever me and my buddies have played and we both think that we've got good hands, and then it comes down to where it's so close. We're yeah, we don't need to fold. We got this. And then just something crazy happens with, one of us will improvise one of the cards and then flip it to another theater later on and just really buff it. So an easy and simple rule set, but there's depths of strategy to it. So I've really enjoyed all of my plays of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I still play it a lot myself. So, I mean,
Now,
yeah.
there's an expansion too for the Spies, Lies, and Supplies.
Right.
What was the inspiration for that, or did you feel like there needed to be more to it, or you just wanted to kind of add some more options out there?
Well, actually, I always had the idea that, maybe because this kind of card game where you've got every card has a different power, right? Or most of them do. The strongest cards, the sixes, don't. But most cards have some sort of special power. And often in those kinds of card games, it's hard not to ask the question, well, what if there were more powers? Like, what would those do? And how would that mix up the game, right? I mean, I think all those of us who've played Magic, which you mentioned earlier, are just sort of familiar with that concept in card games. So right from the beginning, I always thought, well, like, what if you added more cards to this and other effects? And I had certainly ideas that I didn't use for Airland and Sea because the final game is only 18 cards. So some stuff was on the cutting room floor, basically. Now, actually getting to make an expansion, depends on whether or not the game actually does well. Fortunately, Airland and Sea has been fairly popular, so I got to make an expansion for it. And my publisher was okay doing that. But it was something I kind of ideally wanted to do. And the expansion is, it's a standalone expansion, which means that you can treat it almost like a sequel in the sense that you can play it totally by itself. I suppose someone could even play it first. I don't think that happens usually. But let's say you like Airland and Sea, you know the rules well, you've enjoyed it, and then you just kind of want to play a different game that uses the same rule set that you know, so you don't have to learn a new game from scratch, but that changes up the powers on the card so that all of a sudden the mind games and the strategies are just a little bit different. But then there's also rules that I put in there for ways to combine the two games. And the main way you combine them is that you use 5 theaters in the middle, or 5 areas that you're trying to control. Instead of 3. And that makes for sort of a longer, more complex game.
Now, there's also been, is it just a reskin of the Critters at War, or did that change up mechanics as well?
Right. So it can be a little confusing, but there's 2 versions of both the original game and the expansion, right? There's the original version had a World War II theme, and there's now one that has these, crazy animals, cartoon animals that are fighting, and it's much more colorful and silly looking. My publisher made that decision, I think, because although the World War II themed game did fairly well, there were a fair number of people that just wasn't for them. That theme just wasn't interesting to them. It wasn't grabbing their eye. So they did make this reskin. And to your question, it's not different at all. It's exactly the same game. The expansion is exactly the same as well. It's just maybe you prefer one art style or another.
Well, I think too, like especially with like the critter one, it would be easier to get younger kids to play it.
Yeah, and I totally get that.
Yeah. Now you've also worked on Scapegoat. Do you want to talk about Scapegoat? I've seen that at a Indie Board and Cards booth in, I want to say it was Origins, maybe. It was either Origins or Gen Con, but I remember seeing it. Do you want to speak any about that?
Yeah. So Scapegoat is a totally different game for 3 to 6 players. It's in that sort of larger genre people call social deduction, which includes, classic games like Werewolf or Resistance, where somebody is a traitor and people are kind of lying to each other. And it includes also other games like the Chameleon, which people might not know as well. But it's in that sort of genre, right, where you're sort of like sitting at the table and you don't know exactly what's going on, and you're trying to suss people out, both from their actions and maybe sort of how they're acting. But it's pretty different than those games. I mean, the basic storyline is you're all goats, hence the name Scapegoat. It's a bit of a pun. But you're also criminals, right? It's sort of a Reservoir Dogs situation, if people have seen that movie. You've just robbed a bank, right? But now, like many thieves, you're turning on each other, right? And you're looking for the scapegoat. Who's the person that you're going to throw under the bus and hand off to the cops as the fall guy, essentially, in this situation. So when you start the game, let's say it's a 4-player game, there's a 1 in 4 chance that you are the scapegoat, right? But you're not going to necessarily know that. Instead, you're going to have a card that's telling you who the scapegoat is, and the scapegoat says, "Oh, it's it's Sally across from you." And so everyone's looking at that information, that secret information that's telling them who the scapegoat is. It's just that one person's card is lying to them, basically, right? So if there's 4 people at the table, 3 people's cards says it's me, and my card says it's Sally. Well, that means that I'm the scapegoat, but I don't know that yet. So I have to try to figure that out based on what people are doing at the table. That's the basic setup without getting into more detail. But it's a game that basically is designed to make you feel as paranoid as possible for about 10 minutes, because it's a pretty short game too.
I love that the scapegoat doesn't know that they're the scapegoat.
Right.
Like that's like with Blood on the Clock Tower. We've played a few times at the local game store, and the drunk mechanic in that, or the poison.
Oh yeah.
Is just like, no, I'm telling you, I'm the Undertaker. This is what this person's role was. And then at the end of the game, they're like, no, dude, you were the drunk the whole time. You had no clue what anybody's role was.
Yeah. That idea that you don't actually know who you yourself are. I mean, that's kind of the premise I started with. And you're right. Blood in the Clock Tower does a little bit of that. I mean, Blood in the Clock Tower does almost any mechanic that you could possibly do in this space. That game does, right? So if you want the kitchen sink version of this, then that's a great game to play, of course.
So you said you have another one too called Spots, and it's relatively new.
Yeah, Spots just came out in November, and Spots is a more of a family game. It's a dice game. It's a dice game all about dogs. So dice have spots on them. The dogs that you have in the game also have spots on them, and so you're trying to get the dice that you need to basically complete the dogs in front of you. And it's a push your luck game, but I think it's different than like most push your luck games, right? Like the classic, when people think of a push your luck game, I mean they usually have this sort of blackjack structure to them, right? I mean, blackjack is a push your luck game, right? Where it's like you keep going, and you want to go as far as you can, but at some point you've gone too far, so you have to decide when to stop, right? So it's definitely that kind of game, but instead of every turn kind of having that same structure of do I stop or do I continue, every turn is much more variable because there's 6 actions in the middle of the table and you're drafting just one of them. That one's now no longer available to other people. So the things that you decide to do kind of limit the options for other people. And the actions are smaller, right? They might be just doing something risky or just, getting yourself a bunch of treats, right? Which in that game are rerolls, right? And so you have this sort of larger game of little steps where everybody's racing, right? Because you win by completing 6 dogs first, but the faster you go, the riskier it is. So you're trying to weigh your risk versus like how quickly you need to move. And like I said, it's a family game. It was very much designed to be something that you could literally play with a 5-year-old, really any age, right? But I don't think I still enjoy playing it, with adults. Like I definitely don't think it's a dumb game at all, or a childish game. It's just, you can kind of play it. It'll kind of meet you how you want to play it, right? If you want to play it just dumb and rolling dice, and you can. If you want to get into the probabilities and the strategy, there's definitely a lot there to think about if you're looking for it.
I love that. I'm going to check that out because my daughter, she just turned 5 in January, and every night it's, Daddy, can we do a board game? Can we do this board game? So, a lot of my shelves are now more kid-friendly games other than, just like the heavier Euro style games. Yeah, I love that with kids, though. Like whenever there's a game that's easy enough for kids to do, but then there's still enough strategy to keep the adults interested or just to have the adults play it by themselves. I'm working on prototyping 2 games that I'm working on right now. And I had a bunch of playtest events over the weekend, and the 2 times that there was a kid involved, the kid won against all of the other adults. And I loved it because I'm like, okay, this is how I know that it's working, because the kid was able to figure it out, come up with a strategy, and beat the other adults that are sitting over there running the probabilities in their head. Because it was a dice combination game. And the kid just smoked us. It was like he got 60 or 61, and then the next highest points was 47.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's exactly what you want. I mean, and you know, the spots I'd say is the same way, right? It's like, you know, if someone knows the probabilities, are they going to win more of the time over the long term? Yeah, but can anyone win at any moment, including a child? Of course, yeah, and that's great. That's a great
Yeah.
thing to have in a game.
So, what games right now are you wanting to get back to the table, or you're wanting to get to the table for the first time? Is there anything that's kind of out there that's caught your attention?
Well, in terms of stuff that I've already played and want to play again soon, there's a game called Mindbug that's I think to me is in kind of the same space as Airland and Sea. It's a little head-to-head two-player card game. It's very Magic inspired, but it's just one deck of cards. Its rules are super simple, very easy to learn. Have you heard of this game, Mindbug?
I've heard of it, and I'm trying to picture it, but I'm not, because I feel like there was a chance to demo it for Envoy at one point.
Gotcha. Well, I can tell you the hook of it, right? The hook of it is it's pretty random in terms of the hand that you're dealt and the power level of the cards you have. But again, a lot like Airland Sea with the withdrawal mechanism, there's a twist here that makes it so that even if you have a bad hand, sometimes you can do quite well. And that's that each player has two mind bugs, which are just sort of two cards in front of them you can spend. And when you spend a mind bug, you basically like, actually a better way to explain it is if your opponent does something that you think I can't allow that to happen, that is just too good, then you spend one of your mind bugs and you take the card and do it instead.
Okay.
So you have two mind bugs, but they also have two mind bugs. So it's this game of trying to see like, okay, my opponent just did something really good, but is that the best thing they have, right? Should I mind bug that thing? Or is that just, bait, right? And once I like mind bug that one, they're going to be like, aha, my real good move is actually this next one. So there's some bluffing there too. Really cool little game. And I love like my small 2-player games, like I said, that I can play at a bar or restaurant. So that's something that's on my mind. And then as far as like new games to play, like I mean, given that I design this stuff all the time, I'm always doing research, right? So I have a giant document of things that I need to play, a big list. So, I mean, I could pull some off there if you want me to, but I would definitely wouldn't go through them all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. Casting Shadows, I think is the name of it. A lot of people are getting it back from their Kickstarter. My buddy just got it and I want to give it a shot.
Oh, tell me, I don't know about that one, actually. Tell me more about that.
I haven't seen the gameplay of it. Just the pieces look amazing. Like the table presence looks amazing and the artwork. And he ended up getting it for his daughter, but he said that it's been a really solid game, but I'm not sure what the actual mechanics are of it. It's just one of those, it's like, this is the new hot thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
I'll need to look that up. Yeah.
And then, so I know it always fluctuates up and down with everybody. What's probably your top 3 games of all time, though, right now for you?
Top 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course, that always fluctuates. So I can sort of like, okay, the first one that always comes to mind is still, believe it or not, like Dominion. I mean, they have not stopped releasing sets for that game. I know a lot of people have moved on to other deck builders, and certainly I play other deck builders, right? I'm not, I don't only play Dominion, but in my mind, it's still the best. It's just the way that you set up that game with any combination of cards, and now the newer sets really have added a lot in terms of, we're not just talking about kingdom cards that you buy for your deck anymore. There's now these I can't remember all the names of them. There's these events and landmarks that give you different scoring opportunities or different alternate actions you can do. I feel like over time, the game of Dominion has almost evolved into like a Euro game generator. Like it just algorithmically generates a new Euro game. Because if you use some of these newer cards and mechanisms, you're almost just not even just playing a simple deck builder anymore. You've got all these different levers to pull. So that's still something I'm a huge fan of. Lords of Vegas always comes to mind as a game I don't play as often, but it's just one of my favorites to play with a bunch of really good friends. To me, Lords of Vegas is kind of like the game that Monopoly wants to be. It's you get to sit around and you get to there's a little bit of gambling and buying property and trading and negotiating, and a lot of luck, but also some strategy. It's just a really, really fun game. And then maybe the third one, I'll say innovation, which is another card game with powers and stuff. But it might be one of the wildest and craziest ones out there. It's just one deck of cards, but every single card in the deck is unique. They all have completely insane powers. It's, every game of that I have kind of tells some insane story. There's cards in that game that I've maybe seen once, even because of the way the game is structured. Like almost every time I play it, like some new combination or something comes out of that deck. So huge fan of that game.
Have you seen the Dominion like lazy Susans that people have been making? So it's just like a big wooden circular disc, and all of the spots are cut out and everything to be able to lay out your 10 cards or your 10 stacks there, and then you've got your draw deck and discard. But then you can literally just like spin the board to the next person.
When I lived in Los Angeles about 4 years ago. There was a board game cafe, which sadly now is, I believe, no longer in business, that had those. And that was like the one, because I don't own one. I guess maybe you can order them now. I don't know who makes them, but there's
a ton of people on Etsy that make them.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so I did see one back then. It was very, very cool.
Yeah. I'm like, ooh, do I really need it? Like, do I play Dominion enough to to justify that? Because I think it was like $150 or something. It was kind of like the going rate for them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess if anyone would invest that much in Dominion, it might be me. So I'd have to think about it.
As I say, I've only played the base game and then Prosperity with it.
Yeah, Prosperity is a very, very good one. Yeah. But then now, honestly, my biggest problem is just keeping up with it is they, at one point they said they were done, and then I had a box that fit everything, and then they just kept coming out with sets. And now I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do?
So if you're really big into deck builders, I'm going to sound crazy when I say this, okay? But there is an Insane Clown Posse deck builder. It's called Into the Echo Side.
Okay.
And mechanically, it is very, very good. Like, I was surprised. I bought it as a joke because it was like $45. I'm like, whatever.
Huh.
I'm going to just see. Played it. It is very solid.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take a look at how that works. At the very, I don't know if is it like something that's in print and easy to get, or
it is published through their record label.
Interesting. So someone in that band is just really into games, I assume, or something.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, okay.
Yeah. Somebody at the record label or somebody that's always with the band, like they came up with it and they're like, yeah, man, like throw our stuff on there.
Okay.
And so like the theme probably turns a ton of people off, but mechanically it's a very solid game.
Well, I'll have to at least read the rules for it then. Definitely curious.
So let's go ahead and wrap up here. Is there any social media sites that you want to direct people toward, websites, anything like that, to where they can find out more about you, where they can purchase your games?
Yeah. So johnperry.com is where just my just you can find my work, right? Like links to all that stuff is there if you want to contact me. So that's an easy one. I'm on Twitter, so I'm almost always like posting about my new games and stuff there too, if you want to like find out about that stuff as it's happening. But that's about it. Yeah. I mean, Spots is the new game. So obviously if you want to go check that one out, there should be a link on my personal website that I just gave out. So johnperry.com. And
that's just JON.
Right. No H. Yeah, exactly. I should probably clarify that because a lot of times that goes wrong. So JONPERRY.
All right. Well, John, I appreciate the time, and I had a great conversation with you, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks for setting this up.
Absolutely.